You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a podcast supported by listeners like you. To contribute, visit patreon.com/I Have Some Notes. Okay, Liam, here's a pitch. A cute contemporary romantic comedy, maybe starring Meg Ryan?
I wouldn't call that contemporary. It's very 90s.
Okay, what about a parody movie that lampoons all recent horror movies?
That's already been done, and the trend peaked in the 2000s.
How about we adapt a trilogy of young adult sci-fi novels into a 4-film series?
All the good ones and not so good ones got made in the 2010s. Have you been living under a rock?
Okay. What about a superhero action adventure that takes place across multiple timelines and alternate dimensions?
Even that premise is extremely played out, and we aren't even halfway through this decade. I have some notes. Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
And I'm Greg Beaver.
And today we are discussing the 2023 film, The Flash. The Flash. Gang, strike is over. Superhero movies are back.
On the menu, yes.
Yes.
Finally, we can get those hits on our content again.
Yes. Movies people have seen. Yeah.
I like to think that we encourage people to watch some of the movies that we covered, though.
I would hope so, but also, it's fun it's familiar things are fun. That's why they keep making these things.
Yeah.
We love what's familiar.
Yeah. I mean, judging by the number of comments that we got on this movie, everyone's pretty excited to be getting back to fixing some blockbuster trash.
Get back to our bread and butter.
Yeah.
and who boy does this one really elicit a lot of comments, because there's so many things to remark on.
This is a remarkable movie.
It is, you know what? Let's give it that. The Flash 2023, remarkable film.
Yeah. Put that poll quote on the box. Remarkable. I have some notes.
This was a fun. I deliberately didn't watch it because I figured we'd have to do it for the podcast eventually, and I'm very glad, because I don't know that I have an interest in watching this a second time.
Yeah, I deliberately didn't watch it because I generally don't watch bad movies if we're not watching them for the podcast.
Well, I think this one was sitting at around like 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. So if I had an interest, I could have probably been convinced, but I've been so burned out, as I think the listeners already know, on superhero movies. So I was like, no way, not watching any of these unless I've got to do it for the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't say I don't make any sacrifices for you, I guess.
Yeah, I find it amusing that we kept teasing up that we were going to do Ant-Man Quantumania, and instead we did the other big, terrible multiverse movie.
Yeah, and it's not even going to be the next one. You'll have to wait till 2024 for Ant-Man.
If you really, really want Ant-Man, hit us up on social media, on our Discord. But also, there's other movies than superhero movies, right? Yeah,
we did a few of them.
Yeah. I am not fully in superhero fatigue. I still am saving. I'm saving all my stamina for Marvel. I haven't given up on that yet. Amanda and I went and saw Marvels in a theater Friday night, second weekend it was out. There were 6 people in the theater. So, I might not be done with them, but I think everybody else is.
That movie had an unfortunate, a precipitous drop in its second weekend, almost historic. So that one, even I'm confused by that, because it's people who have seen it seem to like it well enough. So I'm not sure why the drop off was that bad. Usually if people like it, there's some lift from some word of mouth, but
it's weird too. I don't know that that's necessarily just a superhero fatigue thing. as I understand it, just theaters have been kind of ghost towns for the last
Yeah.
year. Outside of the Barbenheimer thing during the summer, which got a lot of people excited to go to the theater and did huge numbers, nothing's really been like big since then. And nothing's really been drawing people out to theaters, which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it might be just an overall malaise of the types of movies that we've been getting, which is, I mean, very samey. So for the blockbuster affair, they all, do they not, maybe it's just me, they all kind of feel like the same movie, do they not?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So when Barbenheimer showed up, I think everyone was like, oh, both of these are quite different. I'm very interested. And I'm going to go. And I think there was some renown around, obviously, the property of Barbie, but also, the institution that is Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I kind of dread watching just about any blockbuster right now, because there's some sort of, I don't know, it's the corporateness of them all right now. And that's something I'm going to get into later about this movie, that just, it feels so artificial and forced, that just makes me want to check out pretty quickly with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it feels hollow. It feels like there's the vision behind them aren't artistic vision. It's some kind of marketing vision. It's some kind of big picture tentpole film series return on your investment vision. Whereas, like, yes, Barbie is a brand, but like as much of a pull as the name Barbie was, Greta Gerwig, just the like kind of indie hype around that was part of the draw. And I think people were just drawn to the movies that had original artistic vision and not hollow nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to Barbie's credit, it had a fantastic trailer, I think, that immediately spoke to people that this wasn't just going to be another property film. It seemed to immediately have a voice, and that came through even in the trailer, which is
in the
to the movie's credit, right?
Yeah.
But speaking of movies without much of a voice, thanks director of The Flash, Andy Muschietti, from It and It Chapter 2, written by Christina Hodson of Birds of Prey and Bumblebee fame.
Which and those are two pretty good movies.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
Is Bumblebee good?
Yeah, it is actually. It's the best Transformer movie.
Damn. Okay. All right. Sold.
So I actually do recommend it. It's actually a pretty good time.
Yeah, and Birds of Prey was dope. And of course, this film is based on the famous comic book character Quicksilver. The cast is Ezra Miller as Barry Allen, aka The Flash, Michael Keaton as Batman Bruce Wayne. Hey, that's the name of my cat. Sasha Cal.
Wait, is your cat named Batman Bruce Wayne?
He's named Bruce Wayne. Yeah.
Okay.
Sasha Callie as Kara Zor-El, Michael Shannon as General Zod, Maribel Verdú as Nora Allen, and Ron Livingston as Henry Allen. I took most of the movie to be like, oh yeah, the guy from Office Space.
The guy from Office Space. I had the same thing, like partway through the movie. I was like, that guy looks so familiar.
It wasn't until he was getting off the hook for his crime at the end of the movie. I was like, oh, the Office Space guy.
I clued in about the time that we saw the younger version of him in the past. And I was like, oh, it's the Office Space guy.
So I think, like, just overall impressions of this one. How did everybody feel? I'll start because I think I'm the most positive on it. It was too long, but fine. Whereas I would describe the Marvels as almost too short and fine. So that's why the Marvels is infinitely a better movie than this.
Better to get in and get out quick than beleaguer the point.
Please, movie studios, for the love of God, give me a 90-minute movie, especially if it's an action movie. I don't want to sit and watch a 2.5 hour The Flash movie.
Yeah, the irony of the Flash being in a super long movie that just keeps dragging
just a
itself out.
slog. Yeah. Just an absolute slog. But overall, I left it entertained. I think I'm in the minority. I did not find this character, Barry Allen, or even young Barry Allen, as annoying and obnoxious as everybody else did. But that I realize that's I'm in a minority. But overall, I left the film mostly entertained. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, no, that was all very stupid. What about you guys? What was your takeaway?
I was pretty meh on it. I'm probably closer to where you landed on it, where it's fine. It wasn't like unwatchably bad. There were definitely things in it that I enjoyed. There were some moments that like where the comedy hit. There were some cool things that I enjoyed, some nice ideas that were played with, but overall it was just kind of like, meh. I've kind of seen this all before. Yeah. A couple moments that hit, a couple jokes that land, but overall, yeah. Greg?
I hated it. This one is a weird one because it's a movie that gets the heart right, but everything else around it is a big mess.
That's interesting take. Yeah, actually, damn.
Yeah.
Like Barry's relationship with his mother and the theme of loss and acceptance, and like I track that all very well, and there are a couple really good scenes that are written beautifully and really, really work. And that would be great if it weren't surrounded by all this superhero schmoz that makes a big mess of everything. And it's really unfortunate to me. Like, and I definitely feel like there's like, you can definitely feel the corporate hands in this one,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no more movie studio scene than I've ever seen in my entire life than that final convergence of timelines scene with like the spheres.
Oh, the disco balls of alternate dimensions.
Yeah. That like they like those disco balls like literally look like they have film strips in them. And like, yeah, it's just, I've never seen anything so slimily corporate in a movie before, and it was absolutely disgusting. If it wasn't in it, maybe this movie gets like a 2.5 stars for me, 3 stars or whatever, but like that just dragged everything into the gutter.
Oh yeah. That scene was the most egregious. I'm almost tempted to have Scott do the plot summary now, because I want to really belabor how bad that particular scene was. So let's catch everybody up on the off chance you haven't seen this particular film.
Tell me something. You can go anywhere. Another timeline. Another universe. So why do you want to stay and fight to save this one?
Because this is the world where my mom lives. I'm not going to lose her again.
If you were to go into the past, you have no idea what the consequences can be. Bruce, I could fix things. You could also destroy everything.
This can't be happening. I completely broke the universe.
Zod, we've been waiting for you.
I created a world with no metahumans. And now there's no one to defend us.
Want some help?
You are?
Yeah. I'm Batman.
Barry Allen isn't just a quippy Spider-Man wannabe member of the Justice League. He's also a superhero of his own repute. He saves babies, for example. Lots of creepy CGI babies. But he also misses his mommy, who died when he was a 10-year-old baby. Barry's dad caught the blame for her death after a home invasion was mistaken for domestic violence, and he remains in the slammer to this day. Using his The Flash powers, Barry one day randomly runs so fast he travels through time to the day of his mother's murder. Upon preventing her death, the Flash runs back to his own times, but is interrupted by an evil time traveler. Who is this mysterious figure? Don't worry about it. No one else seems to. Barry returns home to discover his mom is still alive, but he also arrived a little too early and runs into himself as an obnoxious teenager. Turns out he's arrived the very day he gets his powers. Concerned if young Barry doesn't get zapped by lightning in the past, he'll lose his powers in the present, Barry convinces himself to get struck by a massive thunderbolt. It does not go well. Young Barry gets his powers, but old Barry loses them. To make matters worse, this is also the day General Zod arrives to pound the Earth with his terraforming engine. But Superman isn't around to stop him. In fact, none of the Justice Leaguers seem to exist. Well, except for one, Batman. But not that Batman, this Batman. An older Batman, who says all the things you remember from those old Batmans. Yeah, everyone clap now. Bruce Wayne explains that the studios demanded a multiverse movie, so that's what the Flash is now experiencing. They go to find Superman, who's presumably been locked up in a Russian gulag, except gasp, it's a lady. After some convincing, Kara Zor-El helps Barry get his powers back and joins them in the fight against Zod. Batman and Kara die in the fight, but young Barry is convinced he can just go back in time and save them. No matter how many times he tries, though, it never works. Finally, reality breaks down and the universe fragments into a cavalcade of CGI cameos, just as Stephen Hawking predicted. Obsessed young Barry turns out to have been the evil time guy all along. In the end, Barry must kill both his younger self and his mom to restore the multi-time verse. And maybe learn a lesson about letting go or something. Who knows? Now, if that seemed like a very long-winded plot summary, I'm going to point out there are several plot beats that we skipped over.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Like, when we said this movie is a slog, we were not joking.
Yeah.
So you wanted to get into the globes of multiverse.
Yeah, because that's the thing that I got really hung up on, specifically the Nicolas Cage Superman movie, because it... at one point, as he's seeing like black and white Superman, he's seeing Christopher Reeve Superman, he's seeing Adam West Batman, yada yada. They show terribly CGI'd Nicolas Cage as Superman in the never-made Death of Superman movie. Tim Burton
killing a giant spider,
as much discussed in the Kevin Smith bit, as much discussed in the documentary about this movie that never got made, and it is audacious that they not only tried to pull the thing No Way Home does, which is retroactively tie old movies into this multiverse movie instead of creating multiversal iterations on the base reality they've presented, but now they're doing it with movies that don't even exist. It was unhinged. I'm like, who is this for? This is just for me?
Yeah, this is
and
a
the
meme.
kind of
it's
yeah,
meme.
It's a meme. Good. Oh, it was so. It got me thinking about multiverse movies. And I want to lay a little bit of a theory on you guys, like really what a good multiverse movie needs. I ended up realizing this movie, The Flash, made me like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness more and Spider-Man No Way Home less. Because at least to its credit, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness presents a base reality and then creates new iterations on that base reality. We don't go into other movies. We don't go into other works. We don't go into comic book storylines or video game storylines. All of the multiversal threads in Multiverse of Madness are wholly original. They have little references like Black Bolt's there and the guy from The Office is Reed Richards, whatever. But those are all unique universes to that movie. That is also why Everything Everywhere All at Once is very, very good. The best multiverse movie ever made. There's also a great movie called Coherence. If you've never seen Coherence, check it out. It is also probably one of the most well executed multiverse movies. And so what I realized is this premise only works the same way a good time travel premise works, where you're riffing on this base reality the second you start pulling other things in to try to make a fake reality, it's not guaranteed to be bad, but it's diminishing returns. So like Everything Everywhere All at Once, top of the list, right? Then you got, like Doctor Strange, the new Loki series where like they're still going to new original timelines and things. Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse. They're pulling from the comics, they're pulling from video games, but you don't actually need to know like who Ben Reilly is or who Spider-Ham is to appreciate those. Yeah? Do you agree?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
Lego Batman is another one where like the Joker gets Voldemort and King Kong to come help, fuck up Batman. If you had never heard of Sauron, you could still enjoy that movie, but kind of like, okay, now that's a bit of a stretch. Like you're adding, Harry Potter into this Batman movie. And then the bottom of the barrel is like No Way Home and The Flash, though No Way Home definitely does it better. It's still down in the mud, taking these old movies that are just nostalgia bait and everyone already kind of likes them and forcing them into this multiversal premise. And it sucks. You can't do that. And you definitely can't do that with movies you never even goddamn made. So going forward, I'm only watching multiverse movies that just have iterations on the base reality. Holy shit, that's the only way that premise is meaningful story-wise. So there you go. That's my little rant.
I guess at least No Way Home had some way of weaving in the metatextualness of it into the plot itself. But like much like these spheres of film reels that we saw, like the ending of No Way Home really soured me on that movie because at the time Sony was getting their rights back to Spider-Man, so they kind of retcon the Tom Holland Spider-Man, reset him so that he can be used by whoever gets the rights next. And I just could see like the deals being made as I'm watching the movie, and I'm just like, I don't like this. This is I just want a good movie for movie's sake. I don't want them to be setting up their next movie because they can't decide who gets to do a Spider-Man movie. And this
it's gross. And it's also like weird that there's already even a different Spider-Man movie doing it better by not reminding you of other movies you like.
Yeah. The Spider-Verse movies are having much more fun while showing you lots of different versions of Spider-Man and some you might recognize but some you don't. But it's not a situation where you're just being asked to enjoy it because you recognize it.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah. And yeah, I've got some minor complaints about Across the Spider-Verse, but that we'll get into later just because it's sort of related to how I feel about how this movie handles time travel and multiverses. But overall, like, it's a very a movie that you can feel a whole lot of love in it, and just like artistry, just like this is a movie. There's people who care and about the production and the design and the characters themselves and things like that. You don't really feel that here, and especially in that global time mashing scene is where everything breaks down. And like when you started this, you kicked it off with the Nicolas Cage thing. The thing that really bugged me about that Nicolas Cage scene is that it went on for so long, and it had to do that for a few reasons, because it had to set up this whole spider thing, right? And then it wanted to give you a little reveal of Nicolas Cage, so you couldn't just get Christopher Reeve and George Reeve. You had to get this longer scenes to tell people what you were doing. Yeah. So it goes on for an eternally long time. And like, we're all seeing all these different versions of Superman, but like, this is a Flash movie. So like, we're not seeing any versions of the Flash. And the reason we're not seeing any version of the Flash is because the WB doesn't have as many versions of the Flash to show us. So they just decided that, fuck it, we'll just show them a whole bunch of Supermans, because we want people to clap when they see things that they recognize.
And it's totally superfluous, even within the scene that it's in, because like it's not like all of these cameo characters come and help him save the day or anything. They just literally stand there passively and watch and watch for a moment as stuff is unfolding. And it's just you're exactly right. It's a cavalcade of cameos that don't actually serve the story in any way. Like, it would be more interesting if Christopher Reeve Superman popped out of his timeline and punched a bad guy. Like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Especially because Christopher Reeve Superman fucks with time in his movie.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'd even forgive some of the crappy CGI if, they came out, or also maybe not, because pretty much also everyone we see in the Disco Balls thing, save for Nicolas Cage, is dead, which is gross. And like, they didn't sign off to have their image used. It's the same problem I had with Harold Ramis at the end of Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like, don't do that, please. Like, Yeah. For me, it's a problem with the consent. Like it doesn't really matter to me that like, the estate gave them permission. The estate. Well, that the person was a person, and you don't just get to use their likeness and their voice or whatever to do whatever you want with it.
I had a problem with that in Star Wars Rogue One too. Yeah. And here's the thing, like, a character can outlive an actor. James Bond has been famously played by a cavalcade of men over the years, and nobody bats an eye over it. I don't see why you can't just recast a character. You couldn't have someone else play Egon in a Ghostbusters movie. Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? He's not. Harold Ramis originated the role, but he's not the be-all, end-all of that character. The character doesn't have to die with him. And you can do the same thing here. You could do the same thing anywhere. You can have different people play. You could have, like, Brandon Routh played basically the Christopher Reeve Superman in his Superman movie. Like, that's essentially who he was playing. It was being set up as kind of a sequel to that series. Yeah. You could have had him show up as Superman. And it would have been the Christopher Reeve Superman, quote unquote. Like, it's fine.
Other thing you could have done is not worried about the actor, because then it pulls you right out of it. Then you're thinking about the business of making movies. What if they had been like, oh, here's a timeline where it's caveman Superman, and where it's ska Batman, and where it's,
or pull from the comics. Have, like, they go to Russia, have Soviet Superman from Superman
show me
Red
different
Sun.
Random ass alternate universes where it's like, oh, it's Hot Dog Finger the Flash. Like,
it was lazy and pandering and didn't serve the story really. It was just to show a bunch of old nostalgia stuff.
Yeah. So we've covered that 5 minutes of the movie. There's still 2 hours and 25 minutes more to pull apart.
Oh God. Oh God.
I wanted to ask you both about this movie's concept of time travel and I guess also multiversal travel. Mm-hmm. Like, I think both of you, I guess I should just sort of tell people what it is if they haven't seen it. But like, this movie posits that unlike in something like Back to the Future, where you go back in time, change something, and create a fork in time, altering the future. Yeah. It posits that like changes to the timeline create an entirely new timeline with its own unique past as well as future.
Well, what he's suggesting is that what Batman kind of describes, and I kind of liked it. It was an interesting look at a time travel theory, is that you have a multiverse and it's like a bowl of spaghetti, and some spaghetti crosses over other spaghetti, some spaghetti runs parallel to some spaghetti doesn't even come close. Like, it's totally dissociated, but it all overlaps in this tangle. And when you time travel, you're actually stepping between strands of spaghetti. And sometimes you end up on a piece of spaghetti that's very close to your spaghetti, so it's not all that different. But sometimes you end up on one that's just crossed over, but has a completely different past as well. And that's where you end up in the multiverse. So you can't really time travel. You can only really multiverse travel in this version.
But I quite liked it. Like, time traveling?
It's inconsistent.
But it kind of just tries to have the best of both worlds. Like, this idea that if you go back and change something, you don't create a fork, you create an intersection where a bunch of different things would have had to have occurred for you to zig when you zagged in your timeline. You only get a zag timeline if Michael Keaton's Batman in your universe, right? Like, and I liked it, that idea on paper. I think it's one of the first times I've seen an original take on time travel mechanics, and then it is squandered.
Kinda, yeah.
Extremely squandered. Yeah.
I mean, I agree that it's an interesting concept, but I think the effect of it is like for me as an audience member, like the way that Barry can affect the timeline becomes much less clear to me, and like because it doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, he could just go back and like this is what he does, but he changes he saves his mom by simply adding a can of tomatoes to her shopping cart, which was clever, and then he just removes it to fix things. But for me, it like I start asking myself questions of like, well, why isn't he, when he goes back and changes things, why isn't that hopping to yet another universe? Which I guess it kind of does, but like it just gets like it gets really messy really quickly, and the climax is young Barry going back in time over and over again, and yet we're not jumping over to different universes, which there's kind of like your opportunity. But you're always in the exact same fight with the exact same characters who are always, dying over and over again. So they're kind of like trying to have like, they're trying to play it like a straight time travel movie, but also a multiverse movie. And like they're not really, they're jumping to different rule sets whenever it's convenient. And I think that when the movie's logic breaks down like that, that's when I start getting frustrated. And I kind of laughed because I thought like you were mentioning the bowl of spaghetti was kind of like a clever metaphor. And I felt like what Batman was doing was showing us that we weren't meant to understand it. Here's a bowl of spaghetti. That's what this movie is. Whatever.
Yes. Batman makes two spaghetti analogies. Raw spaghetti, where he's got two solid sticks of spaghetti that pivot and make like, two lines intersecting. That was the part I liked. Then cooking the spaghetti so it's all wiggly googly and putting it in a bowl. I'm like, okay, now this doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense. Yeah, they should have stuck with the raw spaghetti thing, and then you could have had a lot of fun with this like idea that every change creates a pivot, not a fork. Mm-hmm. But then they throw out pivot for hot mess. Yeah. And pivoting and hot messing are two very different things, Batman.
And hot messing is how this movie ends up unfolding.
Yeah.
Well, let's what do you guys have for things you liked about this? Because we all did say there were a few things we liked, and I feel like we're gonna rag on it so hard. Give me one thing that did tickle you, that you did enjoy about this flick.
I did like seeing Michael Keaton Batman. I thought I didn't think it was well earned. I didn't know that it was very well executed, but it was nice seeing Michael Keaton as Batman again. And he was played pretty consistently with the Batman from the 80s Batman movies too. Like I believed it was the same character. And that maybe that's just it hitting me right in the right nostalgia button, but I enjoyed a lot of the stuff with him. Again, I don't know that it was well executed in the context of the movie, but it was nice seeing him suit up as Batman again. I'll say that. Also, Michael Keaton's a blast.
Yeah. I was genuinely a fan of the sort of opening action scene with the babies falling out of the hospital.
Each one in more peril than the last.
Yeah. And the sort of the game it created where he's got to eat because he's hungry. He can't move them too fast or they'll get jostled. And how he's going to like collect these babies and a dog and I think something else and a nurse all at once. It was just like a very well thought out scene. It was one of those great set piece action scenes of a movie that I think the comedy of it paid off. Kind of gave me like Pirates of the Caribbean vibes of just like, here's an action scene that is all in the premise, not necessarily the like punches and kicks and choreo. The joke that kind of no one thanked him and the Justice League are giving him the shit jobs. It got my hopes up pretty high. That's maybe the only fault of that scene was then it set my expectations too high, but I thought that was a genuinely fun introduction to the character, his powers, his struggles, some comedy, some drama. Great opening scene.
Yeah. I think, I said off the top that I really enjoyed the Flash, or like Barry and his mom's relationship. And I think that largely worked. I also thought that when I was watching the first third of this movie, or everything up until young Barry shows up, I was really thinking like, man, Ezra Miller reminds me a little bit of Shia LaBeouf in the sense that they are a very natural actor, just a lot of like raw talent. And I was thinking of that, through about 2/3 of the movie until we got to young Barry, and the choices that Ezra Miller was making for young Barry were so obnoxious and so irritating that I had started to think better about the talent that Ezra has.
Well,
so
fair.
But generally, like very like off the top, I really liked their performance of Old Barry, and yeah, I mean it's unfortunate that they've got such a rough. I don't know what I want to say. It's unfortunate they kind of suck.
They can't handle fame well. They can't hang.
Yeah.
So, I was not as turned off by young Barry as everybody else was, but I can see it.
Yeah.
I think they were just trying to really alternate timeline. This person didn't have to deal with a dead mom and a locked up dad. Therefore, young Barry is as obnoxious as any 20-year-old you'll meet. That kind of tracked for me, and I appreciated how big they went with it. But I also understand why everyone else hated it. But no shade for me on that one.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think that's kind of it for me for like the good things. Because like even like there might be like little moments here and there. Oh, it was generally funny. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Most of the time jokes were pretty good. I just wish that when we got to see Michael Keaton play Batman again, that it didn't feel so hollow when they kept putting the old words in his mouth. So that he could say the thing like it, when he says, hey, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Like that quote is so removed from its original context that it makes no sense in the context that he's saying it. Like, I don't know. There was a few different quotes that he had, and it was just, even the "I'm Batman" line just felt pretty lame to me. So I think it's unfortunate.
It felt lame too, because he goes, I'm Batman. And he says it in a way where it kind of makes sense in the scene, but there's this big pregnant pause so that they can put it in the trailer.
It also doesn't make sense because we've already established that Barry knew he was Batman, and Barry tells young Barry that he's Batman, and they're in his Batcave under his house. So the fact that it's this big reveal and young Barry is like, it's like, what? We went over this 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. And this may be a minor point, but for some reason, when he was the one to explain them what was going on with the timeline, I also felt that was kind of out of character for him, because I don't think of
Batman
as as a scientist, he's kind of like a detective, and I'm sure he thinks critically and all that, and maybe science is an interest of him. I suppose he's like an inventor, or he's supposed to be. I don't know, but I mean, I guess it depends on what version of Batman you call home. But I think it would have been very easy just to have, as Barry are walking through his mansion, just to have a quick little scene where he's because he's old and he's bored because the Gotham's hasn't had much crime, right? So just have them walk through the library, and he appears to have been reading all these science texts or whatever, and then there you go. That way, it makes sense when you get to the diner. Or the diner, would you call that? The kitchen table, yeah.
The spaghetti hole.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a great many criticisms we can levy against this movie, and a great many of them that have probably also been hashed out in other sources. We are here, of course, to fix this, because I don't think it's unfixable. So let's take a quick break, and let's see if we can actually fix The Flash.
I'd like to get more reading done, and joining a book club seems like a good idea, but I don't know.
Why not?
Reading a whole book in a month, that's pretty daunting.
What if it was just a chapter, say a week?
That doesn't sound too bad. Still, getting together with a bunch of people, that's a whole evening.
Well, what if it was only half an hour, whenever you wanted to?
That would be great.
The Read Along, a mini book club for your ears.
Join my wife Anita
and my husband Scott
as we take you on a journey through a good book, one chapter at a time.
Available right now on your podcatcher of choice.
Welcome back to I Have Some Notes. We're going to fix The Flash. I've got a bunch of notes, but I want to actually start this off with a question. In two branching timelines, as it were, is anyone of the three of us going to pitch the fix? Don't put Batman and Superman and Zod in it at all.
It's me. I'm the guy.
Yeah, I guess someone would, because frankly, that just solves a lot of problems if you don't try to multiverse it.
Yeah.
And just try to time travel it.
Like,
hit us with that, and then we'll fix what's on the page.
I recognize we generally try not to do a page one rewrite, but this movie was very wrong-headed from the start to try to try to chase the multiverse train that's already long gone from the station. And then to also go back and use Zod again from he's been in almost every DC movie. Bring in a new villain, for God's sake. Especially because Barry Allen / Wally West, The Flash, they have a famous rogues gallery of regular villains who they constantly cross paths with. And none of them have appeared on film. Like, you could have had him go up against Captain Cold or Mirror Master or Top or Abracadabra or the Trickster.
Gorilla Grodd.
Or Gorilla Grodd or Pied Piper. Like, there's so many of them. And I think that that's what you do, because one of the things that superhero movies frequently fall into the problem of, and some other long-running properties do as well, is that you don't have to Dragon Ball Z it every time. Which is to say, the stakes don't have to get higher and higher and higher and higher. Instead, the stakes can be deeply personal. The reason why Spider-Man Homecoming works so well, coming off of Civil War, no less, for Spider-Man, he just tangled with some of the Avengers. He just hung with the big dogs, and then he comes home and has to stop the Vulture from doing a heist that is so under the radar that the Avengers can't even be bothered to pay attention to it. But it's deeply personal to Peter. It's a little friendly neighborhood Spider-Man adventure, and we're super invested in it because it means something to him. And you could have done that here with Barry, because he's got personal stakes. He's trying to get his dad acquitted. He's done his big, I helped save the world from doomsday or whatever. And now he's back at home, and he's now kind of established as a superhero, and he's just doing his own thing while trying to get his dad out of jail. And that could have been the movie. That could have been the movie we got. It would have been an opportunity to examine his character. It would have been an opportunity to introduce some of his rogues gallery. It would have been an opportunity for him to have a deeply personal but lower stakes adventure. And instead they went so big that it actually falls apart. It could have been something. It could have been something tight. It could have been something local. It could have been something personal. And it was none of those things. Which is weird, because he saves his mom, and it's still not a personal enough movie.
Not personal. So I'm actually surprised. I think what you're suggesting, not only is there no Batman, Zod, whatever, there's no time travel.
No, not even a little. I think
you want him to he's worried his dad's going into prison, and there's too many of the rogues galleries he put in there. His dad's going to get lynched by Captain Cold.
Well, it doesn't even need to necessarily be that, because obviously he's got his secret
pitched
identity.
an idea that didn't have time travel.
Yeah, but because he's still got his secret identity, so it doesn't need to be all these guys I've thrown in prison are going to kill my dad. But
I just pulled something out of my ass.
No, that's fair, but I don't have a super refined story idea, except pit him against something lower stakes that is interfering with his ability to do the job of getting his dad acquitted, so that he's torn between his personal desire to help his dad and his larger desire to be a hero and to continue on and to prove himself in a way to the Justice League that he can do this on his own. And that could have been enough. And it would have been good. And then you get him have that happy ending. He beats the rogue or the couple of rogues, if you want to do a little team up that he has to face off against. He manages to get his dad acquitted. You don't have to do any time travel shenanigans. Batman just cleans up the footage and his dad gets off. Like that's good enough. And we get an opportunity to hang with this character who hasn't had his own solo movie yet. And we don't have to worry about it also being a Batman movie and it also being a Superman movie and us having to fight General Zod again.
Yeah, like that's great.
It's a page one rewrite, which again is kind of against the spirit of our podcast. But I think at the end of the day, that would have been the better starting point for this movie. That would have been the better choice. You even have Captain Boomerang on his rogues list, and that guy was super popular from Suicide Squad. Come on, people.
Yeah. Interesting. I thought you were going to pitch, like I said, keeping the time travel element of it and just doing a more true time travel story with superhero elements where he goes back and it didn't work the way he thought, like real Back to the Future. He goes back and he makes this screwed up timeline. So he goes somewhere else with the added fun that also every time he does it, he, changes some aspect of reality where now George Clooney's Batman or where now, girl Zod shows up or, whatever. Even that would have been better than this,
you know why that would have been better? Because it would have been funnier. And the Flash is a funny character. And him constantly having to go back and change things again to get back to the right reality would have actually been a more interesting movie to me.
Yeah, it's every time travel movie you've seen where they go back, didn't work, go back, didn't work, with this added benefit of the pivot where now things are slightly different going into history as well as the future. Could have been fun. Probably should have done that. So cool.
Could have done either of those.
With the obvious fix out of the way.
Yeah. Well,
the obvious fix of don't do any of this out of the way.
Well, I definitely hate to lose the mom Barry relationship because I think that was the strongest. So, I did really enjoy the subtleness of the tweak he made to the past, where he added a can of tomatoes to her shopping cart. Therefore, she didn't forget the tomatoes. Therefore, her husband doesn't leave the house in order to go get the tomatoes, leaving her vulnerable, I guess. Which, I don't know. I was thinking about that too, and it was like the movie sort of just glosses over the fact that just because the husband isn't home, she dies, and you just which. I mean, if he was there, that doesn't necessarily mean the murderer wouldn't have just killed both of them. There's nothing about, I don't know, that there was something about that just felt there was something about that just felt so patriarchal, and the movie just kind of just glosses right over it. But yeah, but I did like that subtlety. So, but I think you're right, Scott, that removing Kara and Batman is probably the correct way to go for this movie. It would also make the movie quite a bit shorter, which I'm all for.
Yep.
If you want to make a nice tight, Flash action comedy, 90 minutes. That's where you want to hit.
In and out.
And get it punchy. Yeah. Get it out in a flash, as it were. I don't have a whole lot of fixes outside of that. This one was a tough one because there's a lot of mixed and muddled ideas. I wasn't, as I said before, I'm not as big a fan of how they approached time travel as maybe you guys were, but I just had a real struggle thinking about how you pull things apart. And usually when I'm coming up with fixes, I'm usually thinking about, well, what's the heart of this movie? And like the heart of this movie is fine. So it's just like getting rid of all the other shit that makes it would make it a better movie. You know, if it was like, and I liked your idea of like lowering the stakes quite a bit. I think that would help. So if it's not like a world engine or something like that, you know, if it could easily just be more of the Flash fighting younger Barry who becomes evil, right? And like that would be enough for me.
I actually do have kind of a pseudo pitch that this might be a good point to interject with, because I did have one idea for fixing the existing movie, because I think that there was a very risky choice the movie didn't make early on, which is when older Barry goes back to the past. He saves his mom. He comes back. He meets his younger self and realizes, oh, it's Flash Day. We need to go and get you zapped for powers. They go, and they both get struck by lightning. And I think that the more interesting choice in this moment would be for older Barry to have died.
Ooh.
And young Barry to now be left on his own, realizing that older Barry's done something and he doesn't know what. And now he has to go and learn to be a hero without having his hand held the whole time. And he needs to figure out what old Barry changed so that he can change it back, so that he can fix, because now things are starting to go wrong because of the time travel thing. And he eventually comes to realize old Barry saved his mom. And in a heartbreaking realization, he realizes to save the world, he has to go back and stop old Barry from doing it.
Oh, I love that.
And
it's so good.
And so he gets a full character arc, and he learns to become, and we get to see young Barry learn to become a hero. And we get, in a way, the Flash's origin story.
Yeah.
And that would have been so much more interesting, you guys.
Yeah,
and it would have been so much riskier.
That would make the final scene so much more of a gut punch.
Yes, absolutely.
Because this Barry gets to live with his mom being alive that whole time. So and we're going along with the ride, you know, presumably, you know, we're going through the timeline, getting to the, you know, as he gets older and older and older, you know, where he's still he's spent maybe years trying to figure this out. And he's had that relationship with his mom the whole time. And then to have to make that choice in the long run, that's so good.
It's devastating, and he knows it's the right thing to do, and it kills him to do it. And I think that would have been the riskier choice. It would have been very deeply personal, though, and it would have given us a chance to see young Barry grow on his own without just being there as old Barry's sidekick, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it also solves the problem of, well, number one, Barry goes and perfectly recreates the once in a lifetime situation that turned him into the Flash the first time, and then goes and does it again with Batman's help to get his own powers back. And that, at that point, I was like, so anybody can be the Flash.
That's my fix. Like, honestly, if I may now, that was my biggest top of my list fix. You want to shave 20 minutes off this movie? Lose old Barry losing his powers, because they don't do anything. They don't really do much of him training young Barry or having to just deal with the fact that now some other idiot has his powers. They don't do anything with that. And then the fact that he's like, I gotta get my powers back. Well, let me just recreate this freak once in a lifetime accident. And I had the exact same thought you discussed. Like, well, so anyone can do it. Like, why doesn't Batman just set up a chemicals and lightning factory and make himself why
doesn't Batman give himself Flash powers as well? And then we can all have super speed. Yeah.
He thought about it because he's like, I don't think this is going to work, but I'll help you do it. But then when it does work, he's like, yeah, give me some of those chemicals. I want to be the Flash. Yeah. So you just cut that whole bit entirely. Really the only reason that scene exists is to give Supergirl a reason to realize that not all humans are bastards. It's a superhero movie. There's a million ways you can have her learn that Barry, and Batman aren't bastards.
I mean, she can learn that by the fact that they saved her from a Russian gulag. Like, but you know what, Liam? A good way to cut that scene? Kill old Barry.
Yeah, I think your pitch of like having young Barry figure out what changed also plays into that thing we were talking about of like the time travel movie with all of these skewers. Like then you get all those time travel tropes, but it's someone from out of time trying to figure. Yeah, dope.
And it like what a surprise! Like the audience would be like, "What just happened? Old Barry's dead."
Yeah.
And now we have to follow young Barry trying to piece together what old Barry did, and we get you get the dramatic irony because we know what he did. Like, and we know it's going to hurt young Barry to learn what he did. Like, oh, so good.
And if that movie existed, you know what actually would be a killer bit? At the very last scene where George Clooney shows up and he kind of just has that same friend of the show, Robin Slack, had the same observation I did. We like almost said it at the same time. The way this movie ends where Clooney shows up is kind of like that episode of Treehouse of Horrors where like they're eating with the lizard tongues and Homer's like, close enough.
Close enough.
But in your version or what we're pitching here, where like, you know, old Barry dies, young Barry's got to figure it out. Young Barry's got to kill his mom. He gets it all set right. And then, oh shit, George Clooney's here. He didn't quite get it. And it's kind of a bit like a no, I'm still not. I just think that would have actually been a funny scene and not extremely cringy and shitty. Also, again, it just anything, you know, show me Nicolas Cage, not to keep harping on this, but as soon as I see Keaton and Clooney, it just reminds me that Val Kilmer is very sick.
Oh,
and that's not a fun way to remember, you know, oh yeah, at the end of this movie, you remind me that Kilmer can't walk. Cool. Thanks, movie.
Yeah.
That was my big one was just cutting that whole losing powers, getting them back nonsense. That was my big one, but I have 3 like super quick little ones if you'll indulge me. First one is recast Zod. Everyone else is a different actor. Why is Michael Shannon here?
Sure. I'm okay with that.
So like, even if you don't want to, I mean, I think you're right. Don't fight Zod at all, but at least have girl Zod or like old black Zod. I don't know, whatever.
Old Terrence Stamp Zod.
Yeah. Or maybe a different guy comes on Zod Day. Maybe it's Grodd Day and this, you know, hyper intelligent ape from space is here to kick the shit out of it and find some Kryptonian he's got beef with, whatever.
I think the way that Scott pitched it, it definitely opens up to like use pretty much anybody from the Flash's Rogues Gallery, right? It doesn't really matter what the threat is. You just need a threat. So it doesn't need to be Zod.
Yeah. Another one here. Amanda pointed this out when we were watching it. There's a needle drop during the big fight. It's like a raconteur song where the two Barrys are like working together. They're kicking ass. It's that, you know, fun needle drop scene where you're watching the hero go nuts. And that's fine. But then they also cut to Supergirl and some of her action and her fighting while the needle drop still plays. And like, she's not having fun. This isn't a fun team up hero moment for her. This is like retribution and rage. And so just like take any of her action away from the raconteur song, please. It undermined what she was doing by giving her the same like needle drop dancing vibes. And I really hope this has some gravity when I tell you that I'm a huge Marvel fan and will watch all the Marvel movies. And if I'm going to say this, I really mean it. There was too much bathos. There was lots of genuine heartfelt moments, sure, but for every genuine heartfelt moment, there were 2 or 3 that were undercut by a joke. Usually, young Barry's obnoxious laugh. Too much bathos. Let moments breathe. Believe in your drama. All these movies need less bathos.
Agreed.
Those are my fixes.
Guys, I think we pitched a couple good fixes for this movie.
Yeah. Whether it's a page 1 rewrite or just a few tweaks, there's so much to be done with this.
Or just some riskier choices even.
Yeah.
Don't play it safe.
Yeah. And because there's so much to pick apart, our listeners had no shortage of suggestions. Thank you to everyone who commented. Let's get into them. To start things off, Tack asks for some clarification. To be clear, no cans of gasoline or industrial paper shredders as a solution, right?
I mean, that was kind of my first suggestion.
I mean, based on the movie's box office, you might as well have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, why of all the things Warner Brothers is cutting for tax purposes, why wasn't this one of it?
Yeah, they didn't want to give up on the one that had Keaton in it, I guess.
Yeah. Robin Taylor from Cinematological says, where do you start? The main thrust of the story is strong. Barry confronts the chance to change the past and save his parents, but it has disastrous consequences. The movie is deeply flawed, due more to the execution and amount of reshoots and choice to use entirely animation in the action scenes.
Yeah, we didn't really touch on it because it's been harped on elsewhere, but the CGI in this movie is not finished.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It looks pretty much like Polar Express the whole way through. There aren't very many convincing special effects scenes at all, which is kind of crazy to say about a movie that's 2.5 hours. Even the scenes in the opening scenes with Ben Affleck Batman, the cape is very clearly CGI when he's riding on his motorbike, and I'm like, okay, this is a problem.
One of the parts that kind of chapped my ass was how often we see Barry in the Speed Force or like the Flash running, and it's an animation of a figure running and not Ezra in a costume sprinting in front of a green screen. And I think that was a real missed opportunity. One, because then you have to pay some animators to animate a running sequence of a Flash 3D model. And the way the human body runs is very interesting, like, to look at. And so if you see him, he's like running at a full speed. Great. It's an actor running the way you run, like to exercise. And when he's trying to go back in time, it's like the way someone like sprints, the way someone like really puts one leg in front of the other and like flaps their arm. And if you could see, the Flash like sweating and spitting and running really hard, the way someone who is running really hard runs with all of the CG Flash stuff going behind him, it would have looked way better than this like evenly paced, jaunty, slow-mo nonsense that we get. Like it. I think part of me appreciated that his weird jaunt, because it reminds me of like how you run on the moon or something like that. Like we have no idea what running in that speed would entail. So like I think that they were trying to find a way of sort of like his running to be sort of illustrative of that. That was my guess, but I could be entirely wrong. But it did lead to one particularly funny moment where old Barry thinks that he has gotten his powers back, and he starts running around the room, and he runs around the room in that slow jaunt, thinking that he's going really fast, but he's not. So I did enjoy that joke. It was a good joke, and it kind of poked a little bit of fun at the way that they do the run in the Flash. So I don't know. I can agree with you too that like seeing him actually just like really chug would be good too, but I don't know. Yeah. The way they have it, it looks like he's cross country skiing, not running.
Yeah.
Colin McIntyre says, I think if you remove the terrible Batfleck Batman, his costume makes me angry to look at. An over-the-top fan service, brown-nosing Michael Keaton's Batman, you'd have an average-ish movie.
I mean, we kind of agreed.
Definitely one of the worst bat suits I've ever seen. It was awful.
Yeah, the Michael Keaton Batman suit, though, looked pretty good. And I'm glad that they gave him the technology to move his head this time. Because he famously couldn't in the original.
He's had 30 years to figure it out.
Yeah.
Andrew Craig commented, go back in time and tell them not to make it. Besides the obvious fix the CGI, it suffers from a crisis wink of being stuck between what's coming and what's come before. If there was a more definite direction, it would have stuck the landing better. I also would have made it more multiversal. It's cool they brought in Keaton, but then weird that they only relied on the DCEU Zod again. I think that was my comment. Why is it Zod? And Scott's comment again. I would have liked an actual Flash villain to have been in it.
Yes. There's so many Flash villains and none of them have shown up in a movie yet. Put in Captain Cold, put in Mirror Master, do something.
And yeah,
Gorilla Grodd.
Like, okay, to be fair, a lot of the Flash villains are very stupid, like even more stupid than Batman villains, but you could find a cool way to make it like interesting and relevant, or funny and interesting, like most of the Suicide Squad.
Yeah. The Flash is a quippy hero. He's played for laughs. He's a clown. You can have him go up against an equally silly villain and there still be stakes and there still be action and there still be danger. Yeah. And but even though they're both a pair of jerk asses wise-assing at each other, Deadpool does it. Like, you can do that.
I think also if you embrace the silliness, I'm thinking of in Across the Spider-Verse with the Spot. Like that is an inherently very silly villain, but by the end of the movie, he is terrifying. So like there's ways of doing it that even if the character is kind of silly, you can make it have a lot of high drama and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Absolutely.
Stu World Order says recast Ezra. That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's jonesing to see them in any more movies. And that's,
Yeah, there were calls to recast Ezra even before this movie got made, and there were a lot of people who were stunned that they weren't, considering the legal trouble that they were in at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. The Recovered Podcast says, maybe, we're just spitballing here, when all the universes collide, we could have seen some more alternate Flashes. The guy this movie is about, instead of a bunch of alternate Supermen with no other Superman has been in the movie.
I mean, it's not like there was a long-running Flash series that you could have pulled from.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's they could have showed other Flashes, other works, or like I said, I would have rather have just seen, Mustache Universe, Hot Dog Finger Universe, Caveman Universe, whatever, right? Have some actual fun with the concept of a multiverse. Don't remind me of movies that may or may not even exist.
Yeah, this is very similar to the conversation we had in the Doctor Strange episode where, they did do some fun multiverse stuff, but not nearly enough. But,
whereas this one's none. Do a Doctor Strange amount, please.
Not, yes. At least have 5 minutes where we get to explore the interesting world of multiverses.
I've never thought I'd be like, this movie needs less Batman and more Pizza Papa, but here we are.
I was not expecting to come out of this movie going, please be more like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, it's really, holy shit. Derek Mirren says, and we're not supposed to do a page one rewrite?
I think we did pitch one.
Kinda. We bent the rules. We didn't break it.
I just don't think there's a version of the Flashpoint story that could have been satisfying. In my opinion, the lesson of no matter what you do, you can't save her is antithetical to the superhero genre. It'll always be wrong, though this version is especially overcooked. Just watch Looper instead. Do you guys have a time travel movie you want to recommend? Mine's Coherence. If you haven't seen Coherence, it's great.
If you want to cook your noodle, go watch Primer.
Mm-hmm.
That one's pretty convoluted and layered and benefits from a rewatch, and it's pretty hard science time travel. I recommend it.
Palm Springs, I love it. I love those
good old time loop
ones. Yeah, yep.
Good old time loop movie, and of course, I mean, Back to the Future, the classic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, goes without saying.
Danny G says, it's crazy that for the first Flash movie, they did Flashpoint, a company-wide crossover. Crazy. The first Flash movie should have been him fighting the Turtle while Leonard Snart steals a cold gun.
Captain Cold.
Yeah. Needed more of Kara. She was key to Young Barry's arc and needed more time to get to know her. Also, maybe Zod fight could have had some amount of backdrop.
I know nothing about the Flash, so these names are hilarious.
The fact that Scott keeps enthusiastically telling you Captain Cold, whereas I'm Team Gorilla Grodd.
The Leonard Snart made me laugh quite a bit.
Trickster, Weather Wizard, Top. Come on, there's so many good ones.
You could be literally just bullshitting me and just
Abracadabra. He comes from the future. There's time travel right there.
Cody commented, I think the easiest note is to not adapt Flashpoint. Arguably his most popular story, but what makes it exciting doesn't necessarily have to do with the Flash.
Yeah, and that's something that a couple people have brought up at this point. It's just don't go with the big Flash crossover thing right off the bat. There's a reason why Avengers works is because they took the time to lay the pipe for that. Mm-hmm. And you don't just start with Avengers. You build up to it. And this movie,
how
At the
bonkers
very
is
least-
it that like in 2023 we're still saying that about DC movies? That's fucking wild.
Still haven't learned their lesson. Yeah. The Flashpoint storyline is the next Justice League movie, not the first Flash movie.
yes.
Yeah. We got a couple more comments. They're a little longer, so please humor me if I truncate them, but do to the folks we're about to quote, thank you for commenting nonetheless. Two Idiots and a Dog says, does Scrap It and Release Batgirl instead count? Yeah, how is this not a tax write-off? I can't. But more seriously, outside of the issues surrounding Ezra Miller, the other major problem with The Flash is that it's just another example of WB trying to copy the MCU's success without putting in the work to get there.
What we literally just said, yeah.
Yeah. Nathan Martin brings us home with, I mean, this was messy, but I still had fun with it. It's always difficult with stories like this because the answer is always just go further back in time and fix it there. Then add the multiverse timelines to it and it gets a little messy. Take out Reverse Flash or Barry go to his mom's timeline where things are different. I think that having Kara is a good idea as that timeline's Superman.
Yeah, there's some clever stuff in there. It's just, it's a jumble. It's a bowl of spaghetti.
Yeah, I mean, none of those, like, I when it gets to the film's conclusion, like, I did not care that both Batman and Kara bought it. Like, I didn't know enough about them, and I just, yeah, it was like, okay, I guess they're dead. That's fine. And like Batman's death scene is particularly unearned, and Supergirl's could have worked had they spent a lot more time with her.
There's a couple scenes in this movie where characters die in someone else's arms, and the actor gives real like, bleh, I'm dead, and then falls over face. Like on two separate occasions, we laughed out loud of somebody just being like, bleh, and then like eyes roll back in their head and they go limp. Like,
oh no, I seem to have died.
But that concludes this episode on The Flash. Thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting. And of course, thank you for following us on Facebook.com/I have some notes, on Twitter @I have some notes, on Instagram @I have some notes pod, and joining our Discord server. Thank you for that. Wait, you haven't done those things yet? Well, what are you waiting for? Well, at least you've subscribed, rated, and reviewed on Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast app. God damn it, you haven't even done that either? Come on. But thank you to those who have.
Yeah, we also have recently set up shop on Blue Sky. If you've got one of those tasty Blue Sky invites sitting around,
do you want some invites? We can give you some.
we have a couple. Yeah, you can of course also head over to patreon.com/I have some notes right now, because we appreciate your monthly financial support because it helps us keep the lights on around here. You can dive on in with that and get a little bit of extra content, a little bit of early content, and maybe some more bonuses down the road. We're still kind of figuring that out.
Yeah. And one good blockbuster episode deserves another. So, in 2 weeks, we'll be taking on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I've actually been looking forward to watching this one, even though it's got middling reviews. I really want to see where they went with it.
Yeah, I think this one is right in our wheelhouse for a very fixable, middle-of-the-road film.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Until then, I've been Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
And I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies!
For Zod.